Hi, folks.
Hello, Gary, please, over to you.
Hi. So yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak about Attend Anywhere. I'm a high-intensity CBT therapist for the Psychological Wellbeing Service in Cambridge, and I'm also a EMDR practitioner, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprocessing, which we predominantly use for trauma patients, people with PTSD. So I did send a link so that any of the people attending today could actually log on as a patient to Attend Anywhere, just to get an idea of what that experience is like. And you can, I assume that either Carrie or Carol might have sent you that link. I can't remember. I've been communicating with a lot of people, so I can't quite remember which one I sent the link to. But it's quite a simple process to log on as a patient. You just have to copy and paste the link that we send you via email into the right browser. I think it's Safari or Chrome it works in. And then you just enter your name, date of birth and telephone number, and you then emerge into a waiting area. And when you're in the waiting area as a therapist, your name comes up and my end, and I can just click on your name and join the call, and off we go. So it's quite a simple process. A patient was telling me the other day that they actually like the waiting area because I haven't been in myself, so I didn't. This was news to me, that there's bird song being played, and she found it a really relaxing environment to be in just before a session, which was really good feedback that patient gave me. And we're predominantly seeing patients online now. There's a few people left on the face-to-face waiting list for various reasons. But I think when I looked yesterday, there was 36 people left on it. And they're on there for they can't attend anywhere for various individual reasons. So we've been doing it since more or less the beginning of the pandemic. I think we got it up and running. We were on it within about a month, 6 weeks. And I was very reluctant, I have to say, as a therapist. I thought, this just isn't right. I want to be in a room with someone. But I've been fully converted. I truly have. It's just been an incredible experience, and I think the reason that if the patient outcomes in terms of recovery suffered at all, I wouldn't have been converted. But it's been remarkable. It's made seemingly no impact on the level of recovery that patients make. And indeed, their feedback that I've received during my sessions about about Attend Anywhere and doing a video consultation is pretty similar, really, to face-to-face feedback, that they come into the first session with some anxiety because they're meeting someone new. They're just about to talk about themselves in a very personal way, and it might be their first ever time that they've come into therapy. But once that first, or even just the first part of the first session out of the way, they've tended to relax and feel more comfortable and have engaged with therapy very well and found it a really positive experience. So really, there's no difference in that respect. And I know that James Clark, our clinical manager, I think I've just given him the wrong job title there. Our clinical lead, I'll say. I hope he's not on. Is he not on anywhere, is he? They did a service survey to get feedback about whether or not patients would have preferred to do face-to-face rather than video consultation. And the feedback was pretty much 50-50. But I was very surprised at that, because the individual feedback of over the from the patients I've worked with, just asking them at the end of treatment what it was like and so on and so forth. It's been much, I can't recall anyone saying they would have preferred face-to-face. It's just worked for them. And because I do EMDR, there's when it's face to face, I sit there waving my hand backwards and forwards in front of someone's eyes. I won't go into why that is. And I thought that when I first, we can't do that effectively online, which was true, you just can't. And surely I need to be in a session with my magic hand waving it in front of their eyes. But actually we just adapted to another technique to get them to achieve the same thing, which is just that they end up doing this instead of me moving my hand around. That's just called bilateral stimulation, gets their brain really active. And it turns out they really don't need my magic hand. They can just sit there using bilateral stimulation and it works just as well. And in fact, I will never go back to using the waving of my hand technique. I will always get them to do the tapping in this particular intervention because it works, it really does. And I think there's something about them holding themselves and that kind of almost being reassuring that helps that work so well, but that's just my own kind of idea about that. At first, when patients attended via video consultation, everyone attended. It wasn't like face-to-face where you get quite a few cancellations each week and people just not attending the appointment. Everyone was at home and everyone was attending. Certainly I can't speak for the rest of the team, but certainly my patients, they're all attending. But as time has passed by, I think the levels of DNAs and cancellations has pretty much got to back to what it was face to face. So there's been no real change there, as it were. And that's always, it's about 15 to maybe 15%, something like that, of DNAs we have, or cancellations each week. That varies from week to week. What else could I say about it? It's going to carry on. That is absolutely certain. We are going there will be some capacity, I understand, at this stage, but it is, like most things at the moment, is changeable. But we will certainly be working from home, and the provision of video consultations will be offered. And I think at the moment it seems to suggest that it will be the default I can't think what it's called, method of delivering therapy. And I don't think they would have made that bold decision unless they thought that it was helpful to patients. And I know from when the patients have said to me that they don't have to travel into a session, get anxious about getting here on time, going through the Cambridge traffic, spending however long, half an hour, 3/4 an hour to get into a session, then have to do the session, get back to work, or it can take a big chunk of their day and be very inconvenient for them. But I have patients now who are just arrange a private office in their workspace if they're actually going to work currently. I work with a healthcare professional from Addenbrooke's this morning, and she just arranges a room for herself, logs on, and it just takes an hour out of her day, and then she just goes straight back to work. And I think that aspect of it has just been absolutely brilliant for patients. Who wants to spend 3 hours out of a day when you can just spend 1? It kind of makes sense. For the well-being of our staff as well, having talked to many of my colleagues, because I'm actually in my office, well, I've hijacked my manager's office. So been able to speak to staff again, my dear colleagues, and we've been chatting about what it's been like working from home, and it seems that it is a preferred way of working. It just the work-life balance is better. Not having to commute to work, seeing your family more often. It's just better for staff wellbeing, and that's got to be a good thing if to help us deliver the kind of work that we do. I think it's a win all round. So I'm not sure if I can say any more. If anyone's got any questions, then please fire away.
Great, thank you so much, Gary. That was absolutely fascinating. I can really see how doing something like therapy in the comfort of your own home could be much more relaxing and much less stress-inducing. So I can really understand that. And I think there's probably some climate change benefits as well if we're not all travelling around the county. I have got, if people have got questions, if you'd like to put your hand up, because I can't see everybody on the screen. So if anyone's got any questions, if you could use the reaction button at the bottom and then just use that to raise your hand, I'll come to you in turn. Can I just ask, Jonathan, do you want to fire away?
Yes, thanks, Andy. Hello, Gary. I'm Jonathan Wells. I'm a director at Healthwatch. It's a really interesting presentation. Actually, I'll ask two things as I've got the chance. One is just Attend Anywhere. Certainly in the organisations I'm in, I've picked up a lot of positive feedback about Attend Anywhere. So it's really encouraging that. I just wondered, as my first question, whether you've noticed whether older people might be a little bit more, older patients a bit more nervous or reluctant or possibly negative than younger. So that's my first question. The other just is about, obviously in psychological wellbeing services, the low intensity work, as I understand it, is still often by phone, and whether you have any, and phone obviously is another method that's had to be used. Well, I think it was used before COVID, but continues to be used. Whether you have any comments about the clinical effectiveness of low intensity therapy by phone.
I'll address your second question straight away, and I'm afraid that I don't really have any knowledge of that. I mean, we have many low intensity therapists who deliver that particular intervention in 30-minute sessions fortnightly, and patients have 6 sessions. And I think the recovery rates are effective enough, if you like, or good enough to continue to provide that particular intervention by phone. Some of the work, I do believe, is carried out face-to-face for, again, individual reasons why someone can't do telephone work. So we do accommodate that, if you like. And I think that, in fact, that some is taking place over Attend Anywhere as well, but there needs to be a specific reason for that. For anyone who doesn't know what low intensity CBT is, it's a very structured, guided self-help intervention. So people are sent out materials, a workbook on the particular problem they're working on. It could be to do with sleep hygiene, it could be to do with their low mood, and something called behavioural activation that people use. It could be to do with exposure, to do with phobias, or helping people manage intrusive thoughts. And so it's very structured, it's very scripted. And so the they get telephone support to actually complete the self-help modules. So I think in that respect, it's telephone work it's okay for that. but I don't have any first-hand experience of delivering that, and I don't have any feedback from patients, so I don't do that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, there might be some national research on that. I don't know, but that's fine. Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thanks, Gary. I've got some more questions.
And the first question, Jonathan asked the older person question. I'd like to answer that if I can.
Please do.
I've worked with many older people during the pandemic very successfully online, and one particular, when you asked that question, one particular patient stuck in my mind because she was delighted to have the excuse to go out and buy a laptop to do specifically the work online. And yeah, I can only speak from the people I've worked with. It's been fine. I haven't encountered any older person. I'm not sure what age I'm talking about that really, but I feel quite often. It hasn't posed a problem.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Maria now. Maria, let's put your question, please.
I think for myself, it wasn't really a question. I think when Attend Anywhere came into fruition, and it's sort of like I'm sure it was happening in our trust behind the scenes, but it was kind of pushed through really, really quickly when the pandemic started. From a patient experience thing, I think what we were concerned with was making it inclusive and available for everybody. So literally when he made his announcement that the health secretary, whoever it was, within a day we'd received an email saying, I cannot communicate, I communicate using BSL. And it was flagged up to me, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because that sits within patient experience. And we had to quickly look at options to making Attend Anywhere available to all. So we did a lot of work in the trust. And it wasn't an easy task because obviously Attend Anywhere nationally wasn't kind of geared up for people who didn't communicate as English as their first language. So we had to do a lot of work in the trust at looking at options of making it available for people who had a different language or a different way of communicating. And I think going out nationally to the Attend Anywhere network, we went out saying, so what are other trusts doing with regards to making it available? And everybody was like, oh, we haven't considered that. So at North West Anglia, we have done a lot of work of making it available. So we can now have BSL interpreters and languages interpreters, excuse me, merged in on the calls so that it is now available for all, and it's about getting that message out to our patients as well, which is what we've been working on. Brilliant. To look at of getting it out there. But I must say, nationally, when the product was, I suppose, developed, people hadn't really considered that, which was a shame. But for us, it was a case of working really, really quickly with Cambridge Deaf Association, CAPTA, who was our interpreter provider, Sign Live, who is another interpreter provider that we use, of ways of making it accessible for all. Sorry, right. Thank you.
Can I just follow up and make a point there? So, okay.
Yeah, please do, Gary.
One of the things that has emerged by using a video consultation, what I've noticed is that, and I could never understand why this wasn't in place beforehand, is that we have a wide range of nationalities working within our service who can speak other languages other than English. And I can never understand why I would be allocated a patient whose first language wasn't English and I'd need to have an interpreter present, and why my colleague sitting opposite me wouldn't be allocated this patient because they can speak their language fluently. And it seems now that that's happening. It's more likely that you're going to be allocated to therapist who can also speak your first language. That seems to be happening. And I don't think that's my imagination. I hope it's not, but it just from the flurry of emails that go around asking for someone who can also speak fluent, whatever language it might be. And believe me, we have a huge cross-section of different languages being spoken in our service. So that it's kind of, the pandemic's not just forced the delivery of therapy to be remote, but it's also forced that hand as well. And I think it's been a really good thing. But I can only believe you that Maria, that issues around that required sign language just weren't considered initially. But so I'm thankful for all your work that you've been able to do to push that to the fore as well.
Yeah, I think when the NHS purchased or decided they were going to go with a remote platform, it happened really, really quick. I'm sure it was going on behind the scenes, but the pandemic just moved it faster, a lot quicker. And I think literally he made his announcement, and within a day I'd got up my first message, and they'd said to me, "Oh, Maria, what are we going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know, but we'll have to find a way." So we looked at various different options, but it wasn't an easy task, because even when we were out, obviously outsourced for our languages. For a lot of our languages, we've got some internal interpreters, but for a lot of our languages we had to outsource, and our main supplier, they do a lot of contracts across nationally, and we were the first trust to be saying, well, what are we going to do about it? We need to find a way. And they were really good about it. Obviously they were hit by the pandemic themselves, but we had to work really, really quickly. And I'm not saying we've got it right, and we'll just continue to build on it, but I don't think nationally it was even considered. So I think everybody was kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely, Maria. I think that just shows the importance of feedback and thinking things through. It's great it's moved on. I'm very conscious of time. There's a wonderful bit of work at North West Anglia. I've got one person that's patiently been waiting to ask a question and a couple of comments in the chat. And I think we might have to draw it to an end then. So, Rob, would you...
Hi, Gary. Thanks for your presentation. I'm thankful that EMDR is still going. I remember when I worked in a district unit 30 years ago. When it first came in, it was much disparaged, but it seems to be entered its time. It's needed its time. And I remember Simon Wesley from the Royal College recommending it particularly in terms of staff, and we know what staff have been through. And one of my questions, I've got a couple of questions. One is, in terms of the needs of staff of a particular relevance, because Simon, when he spoke about it, said EMDR and trauma-focused therapy, you need specialist therapies. He described it almost like our staff have been through wartime experiences. They're veterans. They've come out at the other end of almost a kind of war situation. So I just wanted some thoughts about that. The second is someone who is a therapist trained in psychodynamic work. It's very difficult to accept you can't have the person in the room with you, because that's breaking all the taboos. And one of my questions was that inequalities, which is referring back to something we've been talking about already, how can we be sure that that person is in a secure environment when you're doing kind of video or work across a screen? Who's listening? Who could be listening? Probably many people don't have access to a safe space. Is it a safe space? What the kind of issues to do with that kind of work? Thank you.
Yeah, on your latter point, we ask them. We ask them if they're able to communicate privately with us in the space that they are. Do they feel safe? Again, I can only speak for my patients. It hasn't been an issue. It's the same when we call someone on the telephone to do assessments pre-pandemic. We always ask, are you in a place where you can speak confidentially, and do you feel safe? It's just a bit of standard practice, really.
Does that cut some people out, that they can't actually say yes to you because they don't have that space in terms of inequality? Some people don't, in same shared accommodation and etc. It means you have a room to yourself in a sense that is safe.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't encountered with one patient coming to mind where it was a bit of a struggle because he lived in a hostel,
Yes.
homeless hostel, but the staff were very supportive of him, making sure that he could get the sessions and making sure he had the IT equipment to be able to do it. I mean, that was a struggle. There's no doubt about that. But it's certainly not a problem that I've encountered. But again, you know, we see a lot of patients, and I see 23 a week. So I'm sure that there has been issues, but I'm confident that my colleagues would endeavour to find a workaround with each case that's presented a problem. And just whilst it comes into my mind, it came in earlier, we've had one day where Attend Anywhere broke, essentially, and we didn't get on until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. One day in the last 18 months. I think that's astonishing. Occasionally the Wi-Fi connection, you know, it just, and we have to end the call and start again. But again, it doesn't disrupt the sessions. No worse than the grounds people at the Fulbourn Hospital site going past on their lawnmowers. You know, that's it's no, or with your lady earlier halfway up Snowdon and the Strimmers. You know, it's just these problems seem to be few and far between. With regard to EMDR and staff, I assume you were talking about staff going through the pandemic
Yes.
in the hospitals.
Yes.
I'm seeing one lady at the moment, and all I can say there is that that come and see me is what I say, and I'll work with you on trauma, and EMDR is fantastic.
Yes.
In so much so, it's my personal view that CBT will be a piece of archaeology in 10, 20 years' time. We won't be using CBT, it'll be all EMDR all the way, because it's powerful, it's quick, and it works.